Good day and welcome to the panelists on this discussion. Jack Devnarain, a pleasure to have you with us. He's the chairman of the South African Guild of Actors. And we also have Motlatsi Mjamba, who is member of the executive of SAGA, an actor in her own right. And we hope that Sibongile Ngoma will join us in a few minutes' time. And I also welcome all the attendees of this webinar. Now, actors go on marches, actors complain, actors act. We love them and we praise them, but now and again they get embroiled in controversies. There's complaints about their working conditions. There are complaints about royalties that are not paid. There are complaints that they have not received any relief during the COVID-19 lockdown, and the list goes on and on and on. And many members of the public in South Africa, their followers and fans, believe that they actually are raking in tons and tons of money. But some of those people, or some of the people who work in the industry, tell me that that is not entirely true. It's almost like golf, right? There may be one or two or three people who take 80% of the money and everybody else has got to share 20%. And even the 20% that's got to be shared, that happens under very controversial circumstances. But be that as it may, I said, let's open up this conversation. I know that the matches are still there. I know that the petitions are still there, but let's learn from each other. So welcome to you, Jack, and welcome to you, Motlatsi.
Thank you. Thanks, brother.
Thanks for having us, Tim.
Right, I go straight to you, Mr. Chairman. Tell me, did I define the problem the right way? What are the pressure points? What are your pain points as we speak, so that before the end of the year, actors should get back on stage or back on screen instead of out in the streets marching?
Tim, you are one of the few people who I know pursues developments in our industry with such vigor, because I know you care deeply about this, as do we, and you're always listening in to what people are saying, and there's a lot being said. Let's face it, not just in form of protest, but also in terms of the regulations that we are calling for. And it's very encouraging to us to see that finally the pleas of actors, of technical crew, of people working in the audiovisual and the live theater performance industry are finally being heard. The difference is that I think our messages are becoming more and more insightful, more nuanced, and we are delivering the message to the right people in the right way. I think that's kind of defined where we are right now, although clearly the COVID restrictions have added a different spin to this. Of concern for us right now is that while the rest of the country seems to be opening up, live theater and live events in our sector remain paralyzed. Yes, there are moves to try and get audiences in, but we're talking about the kind of numbers that will still make the continuation of theater productions unsustainable. You need to have a certain minimum number of ticket sales per venue. Each venue is different in order to make a production sustainable. And this is the big concern right now. This is the reason that there are so many protests, and the reason that we are appealing for assistance and for a sympathetic ear from government.
Well, Motlatsi, tell me, what was your reaction when you had the president talk about the increase of numbers of people who will be allowed, and the fact that theaters will be allowed to open up, but only 50% capacity? Would it help? Are there any venues that come to mind that you think will benefit from the announcement last night?
But Tim, it was a double-edged sword. Hearing that there is an increased number of people that will be allowed to attend certain venues, it was minuscule in the number of attendees or people that need to come to venues that would be allowed. I mean, the stipulation is that 50%, that venues would be allowed, that internal venues would be allowed 50% capacity to a maximum of 200 people, and that external venues would be allowed a maximum of 500 people. And immediately certain venues come to mind, like the Monte Cassino Teatro Theatre, for example, other theatre spaces, the Joburg Theatre, the Artscape Theatre, which are all public theatre spaces. But you also find smaller independent theatre spaces which probably would benefit from something like that. But as Jack said, at the end of the day, profit is made by a minimum number of ticket sales. And so those numbers, even though I suppose from government's perspective seem to be an increase, it still is almost, it almost means nothing at this point for people who are involved in live entertainment.
And I suppose it's going to take some time before you see the numbers picking up anyway. But let's look at how the artists, actors dealt with or coped, economically speaking, during the COVID-19 era. Many people were facing lockdown, but those who work in offices or work in other fields could work from home virtually and therefore still draw salaries. Those who work in government continue to earn their incomes. But it was not the same for actors, right? And it was a stop and start type of affair from the Arts and Culture Department, saying that they will pay some money over to those who had contracts. How was the whole thing managed, Jack, from your point of view? Give us a sense of what the actors and the fraternity had to go through.
It was a triple whammy. I think that's the only way I can describe it. Before I go into a description of that, Rod, may I just add to what Sis Modlachi was saying about the theatre venues, because remember, there is an additional cost now, which before the lockdown wasn't a factor previously. Now we have to look at theatre venues managing the costs of sanitizing the inside of the theatre venue, all the seats, all the props, all the operational equipment, everything that you see on stage and everything backstage as well. So the theatre managers are going to be hard pressed, not only to try to manage ticket prices and to get people in, but in addition to that, to add the extra cost of sanitizing. So just to go to your question, Rotem, I think the idea of a triple whammy is going to be very pivotal in our discussion, because we have to remember that whammy number one, we were simply unable to work to earn. This is a gig economy. We are freelancers. When we work, we earn. When there's no work, there's no earning. So during lockdown, there were simply no opportunities. The opportunities that did exist were, basically trying to do something online. It's a difficult ask. Some performers were able to get it right, not all, because again, you can present whatever you like online. The question is, how do you monetize that? How do you draw people to that? How do you draw sponsors to that? And not everybody has the formula for that. And anybody who tells you that they have the formula is lying. The second reason I believe that this is part of our triple whammy is because being freelancers means that we do not make contributions to the UIF, and we are unable to get UIF in return if there is no work. And as the Minister of Employment and Labour made it very, very clear, you are freelancers. It means that the temporary employee-employer relief strategy, TERS, as everybody knows it, TERS was made available as a relief funding mechanism through the UIF. It therefore meant that freelance actors could not benefit from the relief funding through the UIF. We couldn't access TERS. So that's the second whammy. The triple whammy, the one that rounds up the trifecta, is the fact that actors still don't have a right to earn royalties. It means that for all the work that we might have done in the course of our careers, on film and on television, in drama series, and no matter how they are licensed and distributed around the world, actors still do not have the right to earn a residual income from the exploitation of that work. So we were cut off at the knees. We couldn't get relief, and we weren't allowed to earn. You can imagine where that leaves us now, Bertie.
And it's very unfortunate.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Putin. Just to add on to what Brajak is saying, is that ironically, one would think that with the few people who are able to now start creating work and putting it online, putting content online, one would think that with the amount of work that artists had been forced to put online, that people would start monetizing, as Brajak said. But because of where we are sitting at with legislatively what actors and performers are not allowed to receive as remuneration, basically all of the work that we're seeing online is just being thrown out there for people to exploit. So it's almost as though there's a fourth tier to this trifecta, in that the thing that inspires us to work and drives us to create all of this content that most people, many people are now consuming even more, is not even being remunerated. We're not even able to see the benefits of it. And so there's even a fourth layer to that, is that it's almost as though we're driven to create even more work that we're not remunerated for.
Yeah, I was about to say that the fact that we stayed at home, it means more people watch television, for instance, than ever before. And because of demand for content, there were so many repeats. And I wonder how you felt like, as actors, seeing yourself on screen repeatedly more than ever before, but not any remuneration from that. But how was the situation mitigated by the Department of Arts and Culture, or by government, or any other bodies that are tasked with the responsibility of looking after the interests of the actors? Jack?
The department, I believe they had an earnest effort in good faith to help. And I think we must credit the minister for making every effort in trying to make relief money accessible. There was 150 million rand that he said at the start of the lockdown in the middle of March that he said he would try to make available. I believe he was hamstrung in a number of ways, one of which is that you have limited access to all the people who call themselves actors. How do we identify them? In a world of freelancers, in this gig economy, how do we identify one performer from another who hasn't done any work, who doesn't want to do any work, who hasn't worked, and somebody who has been working really hard and has a body of work that they can point to? So the difficulty in not being a registered employee, and as freelancers we are not, it makes it very difficult then for us to be able to get groups of actors together to say, as a group, this is the kind of relief we are prepared to offer you, this is how much we can offer you, this is how we're going to quantify it, and this is the qualifying criteria. So from the minister's side, obviously not all that money was spent. In fact, according to the Auditor General's report, I think maybe only a quarter of that money or a third of that money was spent in the relief that it was intended for. So there were a number of hurdles, and some of these hurdles the minister tried to address in a number of ways, and he definitely tried to connect into the industry to say, where are the industry organizations that I need to work with in order to be in touch with the performers who need this relief most. And this is where things became even more difficult, because there were organizations that suddenly sprung up, organizations that came out of nowhere. They had no provenance. We don't know if they were ever registered, if they actually have a legitimate member base, if those members actually have ID numbers and addresses. But here they were claiming to have a mandate for all these performers and demanding from the minister that we've got to have funding because there are thousands of starving actors. So this becomes a very, very difficult balancing act for the minister. I don't know if ever there's going to be a right way to do it. What we do know is that the Auditor General's report pointed to payments that were made to people that did not qualify for the relief that was being made available. This should make us worry. It also means that there were a number of people who deserved that funding but weren't able to access it within the time frames and with the criteria that was being applied. So, for example, you could say initially in the first round of funding, there was, please give me proof, demonstrate that you are in a production that was cancelled, and then show me how much you would have earned from that production. Now, at that stage of lockdown, productions were not confirming their cancellation because it was a wait and see game. Maybe next week the president will uplift the lockdown, we can go back to work. Maybe in 2 weeks' time we can go back to work. So productions were holding on, and it became a chicken and egg situation where the president needed to see that the infection rate was coming down. Productions were saying, let's wait and see, we might be able to go back to work. And at the same time, the department was saying, well, if you can't prove that your production was cancelled, you cannot prove that you have, in fact, that you deserve this relief money. So that kind of paints the picture of why relief was not entirely successful in our sector.
Hunty Kruger, you're sending us your greetings from Amanzi Mtoti. Thank you. We welcome that. And if you want to participate in our conversation, also post your questions or comments on the chat box there, and then I'll share with my panelists. Now, Mutlachi, the question of identifying who is a working actor or not, how do you go about it as a South African Guild of Actors? I suppose that, you know, that could be one of the problems that frustrates the Department of Arts and Culture whenever they engage with the community of actors. They never can tell who is an actor and who is not. How do you determine that? And how many members do you have, by the way?
So, Putim, you know, the thing of identifying who is an actor, what is an actor, begins really with the individual, first and foremost. Many people, before you can even think about how government sees who actors are, individuals need to first identify whether or not they are actors, because by the very nature of what it is that we do, many times you get young people who, for example, will graduate from an institution where they studied drama, live performance, theater, dance, and many times a lot of those young people will come out of those institutions and not even be able to practice that particular craft. So there's that group of people. Then you get those who perhaps have gone through a more informal training of some sort. Who perhaps have gone to community theaters, who've been involved in productions extramurally, amateur theater, amateur live performance. Those people who will then also find an opportunity to perhaps get an agent and then start working professionally in the industry. Those people will also need to be considered actors. All the while, these people are, because of them being independent contractors and freelancers, and because the work of acting is not, many times in South Africa, is not the only source of income that one would have, you'll find people having to substitute their income by doing other things, whether it is being a writer, or sometimes not even being in the entertainment industry necessarily. So other people will have to substitute their income by doing other things outside of the entertainment industry. So the definition of who is an actor is already a convoluted definition on its own for individuals. So moving outside of that, just keeping that in mind, what the South African Guild of Actors has tried to do is to be as inclusive as possible with as many people as possible who consider themselves actors. And so that will be young performers who are currently studying and studying, training, whether it's at a university or tertiary institution, or whether it's at a more informal institution. So there's the tier of young performers who are training to become actors. Then you get sort of intermediary performers, people who have just graduated and are starting out in the industry. Those are there's that group of people. Then you get the group of actors who are professionals and have been in the industry for years, and they have a body of work to prove that. Saga at the moment, I think, is sitting on about, I think, just over 400 members who are up to date with their payments of Saga membership fees, which is about 170 Rand a month. Fees that are, at this moment, very difficult for a lot of people to sustain. So we almost as though we have almost two tiers of Saga members who are still able to pay that membership fee every month. And then we have members who are still active members of Saga, but are perhaps have not been able, whose finances have lapsed perhaps, and are not able to actually pay for their fees. So out of all of that group of people, there's about 400 people who are members of Saga. And well, I'm not sure, Brajak, how many actors.
Can I just come in there and say, okay, that's the part of the actors, and by itself it creates problems for instance, yourselves as the executive of Saga, when you go out and lobby, whether lawmakers or even broadcasters, production houses, because to some extent, I suppose it confuses even those people to say, when you speak, on whose behalf are you speaking? If your members, some of your members are also struggling with who they think they are and where they belong. As I'm talking to you now, I'm not sure if all actors in South Africa, be they your members or not, regard you as people who represent them, or only when there's money that is being demanded from government or expected from government do people then emerge and say, yes, me too, raise their hands and say, please include me in your list. Having said that, I suppose it leads to other complications for yourselves when you deal with the industry, in the value chain of the industry, from the creation of work. I know there's a story now in the media and social media about the cooking show of Somizi as an example. Somebody is claiming that that's their concept, to the actual production houses themselves, to the broadcasters who commission the work, because there are issues there. I've heard that there's a concentration of work in a very small number of production houses. So other production houses do not get work. Then you go to the broadcasters themselves who have arrangements with the production houses which exclude even the main actors in those particular soapies, in the case of television, for instance, right? And that is why you have the problem of royalties. Royalties are paid, but who are they paid to? Are they paid to the production companies, or even production companies? So just explain the complications that are there in the value chain, Jack.
Oh, absolutely. I think you've got a very good grasp of it. I will start by saying, though, that actors in South Africa do not have the right to earn royalties, and that's part of our big fight. You must remember the legendary actor, the late Henry Kele, who was majestic in the title role of Shaka Zulu. There was a production that traveled the world, and there were box sets of DVDs that were released on the series. The show itself, the series itself, was licensed to broadcasters around the world. It's estimated that the show made over 5 billion Rand.
Are you kidding me?
And
yeah.
Yeah, those are the figures that we are seeing in media reports.
Yeah.
And what we do know for a fact is that Henry Kele himself died in his 50s, a very sick and a very broken and a very poor man. He did not earn a cent. And that is because South African law does not support the earning of royalties. So if you look at that value chain that you referenced earlier, Bronson, The broadcaster is typically the one that would commission the work, and they would commission the producer to create the work, and the producer would then go and offer the actor a contract in order to perform in the series. So the producer has a business interest, and they're driven by a profit imperative, and they are saying, I want to take as much money from the broadcaster as possible in order to commission this work. I will deliver this work. But in delivering this work, I will make sure that I have enough of a profit margin built into this budget so that even after I pay all my costs, I've settled the actors for all their work, I've paid my crew, I have paid for all the gear that I'm using, I have enough fat in there so that I, as a producer, can make this worth my while. And it absolutely makes sense. It's something that Saga fully supports. Every part in the value chain needs to earn something in order for the business itself to be sustainable. This is not a new model. This model exists everywhere in the world. In South Africa, though, because we don't have a very vibrant independent film production community, we rely very much on commissioned works that are being commissioned by the big broadcasters. Now, the broadcasters, therefore, hold a huge amount of negotiating power. And they hold the money, so they hold the negotiating levers. When they go into a negotiation, basically they can set the terms of the contracts. And if South Africa is to step up and align itself with international best practice, we will have to entertain the notion that actors should be earning royalties. But until the broadcasters actually start to agree to sit down with us and work out what should be a fair standard performers contract, what should royalties look like? And even if, as MultiChoice does, Mnet, for example, the Mnet actors contract will never give an actor any kind of repeat broadcast fee, any kind of commercial exploitation fee. They are saying we are buying out that right. But what Saga has had no success with is, despite our repeated attempts, we have asked Mnet, please indicate to us, in terms of your actors contract, what is the performance fee and what is your buying out fee? But we've never had a response to that. And in fact, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, Saga, you guys are asking for royalties. You are going to ask for regulation of the industry. You are essentially chasing away any foreign direct investment in our film and television production industry. And Saga is saying, well, no, we are simply asking this industry to align itself with international best practice. And that means it has got to be a regulated environment.
Well, Mutlachi, tell me from your experience on the back of what I've just asked Jack now, what typically actors would go through. You know, who's in the right here? One moment we hear actors blaming production companies blame the actors, then the broadcasters blame the production, and it goes all over the place. And I'm speaking as a lay person here, because we never know. It's easy to blame specific individuals, right? The production companies would say, you know what, if you knew what we have to manage when we manage actors, you wouldn't be taking sides with them. In fact, we're doing them a favor. And sometimes, as we know, you can be written out of, an actor can be written out of a script anyway, irrespective of that. And as far as that is concerned, I doubt very much that there are any protections, or there can be any protections built into the new laws that you are contemplating.
So you're asking, Pratim, if
yes,
what it's like for the average actor?
Well, because it's like a groot remorse sometimes, you know, of something that you cannot untangle and make sense of. And we will get to the royalties in a moment. There, one can say it makes sense once the work is done that the actors must be paid royalties according to a particular format and or procedure. But in terms of the goings on, the way things work, it becomes difficult for a layperson to understand what an actor goes through and the basic, let me call them maybe basic minimum standards that should apply that will reflect some fairness in how the system works. Because to me, it comes across as something based on luck. You know, it depends on how lucky you happen to be and on your own personality and maybe your connections. Outside of that, it does not look like a structured system. Those who are lucky enough to crack it, become popular, and public likes them, and public is on their side, can sustain their careers maybe for 6 months, for 6 years. But for others who want to operate as professionals, very inconsistent.
You're not far from the truth there, Pratim, when you say that
Help
what
me
it
get
looks
closer
like.
to the truth.
Yes,
Get
you know,
me closer to the truth.
luck does play a big part in one's success, I suppose, of being an actor. But success at the same time is defined by the individual. So whether your success is monetary, whether you think success is being famous, whether you think success is having longevity and sustainability and being able to just feed your family and pay for your bills. So success is something that is defined by the individual, basically. But for the layperson, what one would think is a successful actor is someone who perhaps has a very big public following and is famous and is making lots and lots and lots of money. So what the average actor would go through, I suppose, being a freelancer, being an independent contractor, you are someone who will come out of an institution having been trained. You will go out and essentially go out to the wolves and industry in which you will be auditioning for days and days and days on end. And I mean, so this what I'm painting now is probably going to be the worst case scenario, where an actor comes out of a training institution and they can sign up with an agent and go for auditions, maybe 3-4 auditions a week, perhaps, depending on what the nature of the industry is at that time. And they can, I mean, there are some people who go for auditions for 2-3 years coming out of training institutions without landing anything, or without landing anything of substance. Substance being whatever it is that you want to achieve for yourself. And then you will land that one job. You will land that television soapy. You will land a theater production or a musical production, and that would be something that is a stable job. Stable being that you are then contracted to work only per call, what they say, per call. So you don't necessarily get a salary. So it won't be that you are getting paid every month a fixed rate every single month for this particular television job or theater job. You would then, your job is essentially only as long as the production lasts, or for as long as you've been contracted to be on this production. While all of that is happening, you are making money elsewhere, doing other things, whether you are becoming a writer, whether you are making your own work, whether you are collaborating with other creatives. It sounds, I can hear that what I'm saying sounds like punishment, really. But what the thing is with artists is that because we are the voices of society, we speak, we come from a place of speaking and wanting to put the mirror up of what society is and what is happening in society to the world. That is what drives us. We are driven by being able to tell people stories and wanting to create and wanting to be the change that drives narratives. You know, if it weren't for shows like Generations, for example, when Generations started out, it was an aspirational storyline. We had never seen Black people eat breakfast with a full platter, you know, in the mornings. We had never seen Black people being portrayed in a certain way. You look at shows, films like Black Panther, for example, where certain parts of the world had never seen or could never imagine the African continent as a thriving continent, a continent that looked at, you know, colonizers, for example, as people that they didn't need, you know. So actors, performers, creatives, we are the people who drive these kinds of narratives and stories. And
it is part of that reason that I invited you to talk to you, and I'm paying attention to what's going on in your industry, that whereas you do all of those things and society benefits and takes advantage or is inspired by the work, it becomes a very strange thing that you seem to also be on the receiving end of whatever it is that is wrong in the way the system works, because everybody else seems to be having their lives organized, so to speak. Once they engage with the economic system, right? They know how much they earn by the end of the month. They know what their jobs are all about. They know where they work. They know that they have medical aid. They know that they have life insurance. They know that they have a retirement plan. And so it goes. But when it comes to the ones who are reflecting the things you mentioned, then the story is different. And therefore, I bring in Sibongile Mgoma. Thank you for joining us. The pleasure to have you with us. And my question to you, because you are an activist for Artists' Lives Matter, and I'm for the arts. A very challenging question. I hope you don't mind. Question is, when are artists themselves going to make their lives matter so that everybody else can buy into the story that artists' lives matter? Or rather, let me put the question differently. Please unpack the concept behind Artists' Lives Matter.
Good afternoon, and I'm sorry that I only joined in so late, but I was struggling with the link and everything, but it's fine, I'm here now. You know, I do want to go to how you ask the questions first, in terms of when are these lives going to matter to artists? You know, there's a very important paradigm shift that needs to happen. We have a culture of celebrity that we have put on such a pedestal. And I always say, I'm not a celebrity, I'm an artist. Because I believe that when you start thinking of yourself as an artist as opposed to a celebrity, the sense of self-importance and ego is removed. And the respect for the art itself is the one that is elevated. And once we have that right, then artists' lives will matter to artists themselves because they understand the importance of what they are doing and the impact on greater society. But as long as it's about celebrity and just going out there and boozing, girls, drugs, you know, then that's not what it is. What is the true definition of a celebrity? It's someone who's celebrated for their excellence. So as Mutlachi was explaining, she has taken time to study, learn, grow, build. So you can't matter unless you respect the craft enough to present it to an audience that you respect. And only then can we then start talking about, as artists, we understand why we matter. It's a difficult task to advocate for people who don't look like they care for themselves or they understand the need for themselves to be put on a pedestal because of value add, you know? So I think the important thing at this stage is, I would say for artists themselves, they would need to then start moving away from being celebrities and let's focus more on being artists. The public can make you a celebrity. Don't make yourself a celebrity.
Okay, Melanie Minar, you have put a question through. You say, as an advertiser, we have always had to pay royalties and usage fees for repeat use of models in campaigns. Why can't this model be implemented for actors and actresses? And I wonder also, I'm adding the question here, Jack, you can respond to this one from Melanie, and I'm also inviting other questions and comments from the attendees. Is there any basic rate that is paid irrespective of how many times a person features in a production, whether it be stage or television or a movie? A call-out fee of sorts that maybe minimum 400 rands a day, something like that.
Yeah, this is, you're talking about the Wild West here, Tim. Firstly, to answer Melanie's question, commercials do pay what you could call the equivalent of royalties, but it's in the form of usage. So yes, actors get paid a usage fee depending on the frequency of the advert, the medium of the advert, and
The territories.
the different territories as well is a very key factor there. So yeah, what we find that there is there's no equivalent in film and television as you would find for usage in commercials. So commercials pretty much likes to operate within their own world. The principles are pretty much the same, but in film and television, we don't find that being paid in the form of royalties. What we are asking for is that we should have the royalty right. Two important reasons that we are motivating for this. One is that we are talking about the sustainability of an industry, and both Sis Bongile and Motlachi have made a very strong case that we are talking about an industry here. Film, television, and theater is industry work. You need professionalism. You need people who are trained in the skill in order to be effective and in order to be marketable within the industry. So we need to eradicate this false notion that if you are unemployable and you can't get work anywhere else, but you quite fancy yourself being a pretty person because you are living in a world of your own ego and superficiality, then there's a place for you. That is not true. The industry has very little space for people like that. The people you find working within this industry, again, are people who are exceptionally productive people who apply themselves with great discipline and diligence into the skills that they need to have in order to market themselves, in order to run a career. Now, the reason we are saying royalties would be a support base for our industry is because we have to incentivize people coming into the industry with the possibility that they can be earning revenue, income, based on the exploitation of their work. So for this reason also, Tim, it's important for us not to include live theater performance and musical theater in this discussion. Royalties apply specifically to audio-visual work, film, television, that sort of thing, that is being now exploited in different media. So
okay, now I've got a comment from Adrian Gelly, who says creating celebrities is often in the interests of the broadcasters and producers, certainly not artists, and instant celebrities are created to serve the medium while artists look on unacknowledged. And therefore, Sibongile comments, you are the one who started this part of the conversation. How do you respond to that? I'll be coming to you, Motlachi, in a moment.
I'm inclined to agree, because think of it this way. So you have someone like myself who has been working for many years, and over time, like in any job, obviously the amount of money you get paid goes up, because now there's experience, there's all of that. So you're no longer paid 300 rands to do certain things. And then a younger person comes into the space, and so what happens is you hear the narrative that the older generation needs to move out and make space for the younger generation. And those who have to pay then use that, because then they're sitting there saying, okay, even the younger generation, if they are qualified and they know their worth, they can be problematic because they will grow up to become another Sibongile, another Jack. So better than bring in someone who is no threat. If they're just grateful to be out there having a Gucci bag and an iPhone, then you know what? Give them just a few peanuts that they can enjoy for now. And if they start being problematic, you find another pretty face. It's less work, it's less stress, it's less struggle. And yeah, so I'm inclined to agree with that.
Well, it seems to me, I will be going back to the industry again, but that on the part of the artist, there's a lot of self-management that is required, right? Not only self in the context of application, but self in terms of career management. Motlatji, share with me your thoughts if you were to give advice to an up and coming or aspirant artist that, how do you go about managing self as self in application and self as somebody managing a career?
The first thing I always say, Tim, is to my students, for example, is to see yourself as a business, first and foremost. That the only way the industry, or one of the ways that the industry will begin to thrive, or for us to be able to see the way we would like to see the industry develop, is for it to begin with the individual artists themselves, and how they conduct themselves, and how they see themselves, and how they present themselves to the world. I would actually like to come back to, as Rajak was speaking about, industry standards and industry rates, and I suppose to answer an earlier question that you had, Tim, about how it is that we would like to see the industry work, to compare ourselves to the international standards, for example. We're always comparing ourselves to America and to the UK because those are, two of the biggest industries in the world. And so just to paint a picture of what those two industries look like for their performers. Before you even go to an audition, if you are living in America, if you are an American or a British actor, before you are even allowed into the audition room, you have to be part of a union. You have to be part of a union, a guild. They won't even allow you into the audition room if you are not part of a group, an organized group that supports.
So you should be verifiable, so to speak, in a way, because suppose in South Africa you can come off the pavement and just walk in and do an audition and maybe even negotiate the price down, whatever the rate may be, and say, you know what, I can even do it for free because I want to be on TV or I want to be in a movie. Okay.
Exactly, Tim. So that is the situation, for example, going overseas and having representation or being part of a union covers those artists, because they then because those people will then be automatically seen as professionals, or at least people who have been trained, who understand the difference, for example, between being a celebrity and being an artist. It already minimizes the confusion in terms of those things and the exploitation of those people. So just for those people who don't understand how the industry works and what it is that we are asking for specifically, that is the difference, right? So so now I've forgotten what your question was because I was so focused on what I was wanting to tell you.
Okay.
So
Look, you're an actor. You can make it up as you go along. You forgot your lines, right? You just go and and we'll pick
yes,
up
you were talking about how we manage ourselves, basically how we have to manage ourselves. So the first thing I tell a lot of young people is to see yourself as a business and do the research. There's so much information out there about what it means to be a business. What is a business? How do you market yourself? How do you sell yourself? What is the difference between a product and a service? We offer a service, but we are also the product. You need to understand the difference between those two. So now we're talking about understanding business language. But at the same time, you also need to understand the relationship, for example, between a performer and their agent. A lot of people don't understand that the relationship between a performer and an agent is such that the agent actually receives commission from the actor's work. So technically speaking, an agent works for the actor. Whereas because our industry is so convoluted and it's not regulated, a lot of people take advantage of those gray areas. And so there's a lot of gray in our industry, which benefits those who are economically more powerful than those who are not. So yes, okay. A lot of the work is.
Let's now focus on how we improve the situation as is now. All right. Part of my question was focused on the artist, but that's ongoing work and it's ongoing conversation. The industry as is currently organized. Sibongile, let me hear your thoughts. What is it that can improve it in the South African context? What are the things, the practical things that can take it to another level and make it easier for the artists to operate in the South African context?
Thank you. Let's look at it from this perspective. So every time the president comes out to address the country, he speaks of different industries with understanding. What does that tell me? It tells me that the people that report to the president understand the industries they're talking about. Every time, without fail, the response to the president's address concerning the industry, the cultural, creative, artistic industries is, but he hasn't touched on anything. He doesn't get us. Now, here's the issue. Who is reporting to the president? What are they reporting to the president? So right there is our starting point, because you cannot have somebody or people going to the president who cannot explain what the industry is about, because then my only conclusion out of this is that the president doesn't understand the industry, because the people who are talking to the industry, talking to the president, are not telling the president the right things, the things that we want the president to hear. You will hear that the Intellectual Property Act goes to the desk of the president and back to the desk of the minister and the portfolio committee. What is going on? Who is not understanding? Who is not hearing? So here's the question. Who are the people employed in what positions, and what is their understanding of what needs to be done? So first of all, we need to take a very hard look in the mirror of what we have placed as our officials, and then clean that up, so that, because think of it this way, in the medical field, we're talking coronavirus right now. There's a pandemic. Imagine if we had a mechanic running the Department of Medicine, what would happen to us during this pandemic? So these are the changes that need to happen. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's time that that whole Department of Arts and Culture is overhauled, so that you have people who understand what is going on in the industry. Secondly, we need to separate sport and arts and culture, because it's all this confusion that is, you know, minister after minister comes in with no clue of what needs to happen, and they don't know who to talk to, because like Jack was saying before, so many organizations spring up because of, hey, it's time to get money. Let's all formulate ourselves into 5 or 6 people and call ourselves an organization. Why? Because who is leading? Do they even have a vision for the industry?
Well, let me interrupt you, and I get the drift, right? But I want to raise my point slightly differently, and hopefully the question will help us get somewhere. The sports people, as an example, are organized as a matter of course, irrespective of what happened. Football being an example. You know, there are many football players, they come in, they go and whatnot. They have tournaments, but there's a sort of system that works there. And when there are issues that require government to intervene and so forth, they can speak with one voice, and it sounds like they mean the same thing. Now, as an observer, when you listen to artists or the community of artists, they press different things at different times. And it doesn't take long, with due respect, to figure out that they seem to be speaking for themselves as individuals away from the industry. So we can use the all-encompassing word of community or industry, but at the end of the day, it is ill-defined by the active people in the industry themselves. So let me refer this to you, Jack, for purposes of economic benefit and as an economic activity. What is it that the industry should do or can do in order for it to be understood by the government? Because remember, those are politicians. They are not actors or artists, right? They are going to understand whatever is presented to them from their point of view. The example that you gave, Sibongile, is a good one because the other people have clarified their case, but they are also trying to figure out how do the artists or the industry, how does it understand itself? Jack?
Actors need to be very clear on what are the statutory regulations that apply to our industry. So if you have to ask an actor now if they know anything about the Copyright Act or the Performance Protection Act, and typically most actors will say no. If you ask them what's the best way for us to regulate our industry, typically many actors will say to you, we need to create a union. Sadly, the message that is not getting through to actors is that as freelancers, we are not empowered by the Labor Relations Act in order to unionize. So we cannot become the US and we cannot become the UK and we cannot unionize. So what do we have to work with? We have existing legislation and we have proposed amendments to the legislation. And that's why you have, as Sis Bongile was saying, we've got important pieces of legislation sitting in front of the president, and we are begging him to sign this because you've got a performance protection amendment bill that gives us the right to earn royalties, and you've got the copyright amendment bill, and it's linked with performance protection, and we are saying we can collect royalties, we can distribute royalties for the very first time ever. It's now 2020, let me remind you, and it's going to give us the opportunity to earn the kind of income where we can actually plug into the economy. And as you were saying, Bratim, we will then be able to go to a bank and ask for their products, their services, medical aid, insurance, investments, car hire, get yourself a bond. All these things can become possible. So the regulation is contained in legislation just as it is in any other industry. Right now, the performance industry is no different than if we were sex workers, because they too have no regulation in their industry. And in fact, Adrian Galley, who sent in a message a little bit earlier, is one of those people who was on the radio very recently saying that he was registered for the UIF. He was in a theatre production running for 3 seasons, and when he applied for his UIF fund, he got a total of 5 rand.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Well, I want us to conclude, and Mutlachi, let's try and take this to another level, even if it's wishful thinking, but it's wishful thinking that will in due time materialize into reality. What do you think needs to be improved within the industry in order for it to gain traction with the lawmakers and get the respect the industry deserves from the lawmakers?
But Tim, it seems like an easy question, but I don't think it is at this point. Honestly and truly, because I am a member of the South African Guild of Actors, and because I've seen the work that the Guild has done for actors for the last 11 years, because it's been around since 2009, its consistency and the work that with Jack and everyone else who has started the South African Guild of Actors, and I'm speaking specifically about actors, has been incredibly forthright and prolific, and they're doing work that is really going to benefit people 40 years to come and over that. Right now, for actors, what I would really strongly encourage actors to do is to join the South African Guild of Actors. And even if they don't join, at least go to the South African Guild of Actors website. It has tons of information about what the South African Guild of Actors is doing and how people can become educated about what it is that they need to do and can do in order to change their own situations.
Sure. And the last word will go to Adrian Galley here. He's just put in a message saying, Because the industry is unregulated, anyone can set themselves up as an agent and lure naive but hopeful talent, charging them a fee to be on their books. Some production houses encourage this practice, where the intermediary functions as a labor broker, providing undiscovered, untrained talent. And in these shark-infested waters, many, I presume, get taken advantage of, which is very sad. But I hope this is but one part of the ongoing conversations that will help to take the industry to another level and improve the working conditions of the actors in South Africa. Thanks very much, Sibongile Mngoma, much appreciated. And Mutlachi Jamba, thank you very much. And Jack Devnarain, I appreciated your time. And to all the attendees, thanks again. We're talking about the actors, COVID-19, and the future of the cultural creative industry. Thank you. Have a wonderful time.